Hi, welcome to America Uncovered. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. My fellow Americans, it's September, which means it's that time of the year again. No, not pumpkin spice season. Although it's almost as nauseating. September means it's possible government shutdown season. Commencing at the siren, any and all crime, including murder, will be legal for the duration of the shutdown. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable. What's that, Shelley? A government shutdown is not the purge. I just wasted a lot of money on Halloween masks. This would have been fun. Okay, so what is a government shutdown? Well, you see, when designing a government, it's important to make sure you include at least one ticking time bomb. It keeps things interesting. And fortunately, the U.S. government has a big one. Money. Every year, the federal government is supposed to approve a budget for the next year. About 2/3 of the budget is made of programs that are permanently funded. Things like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. The other 1/3 of the budget needs to be funded every year. Things like military spending, funding national parks, and paying government employees. Quick civics lesson, kids. There are two branches of the U.S. federal government responsible for the budget. The executive branch, the president, and the legislative branch, Congress. It's the president's job to collect taxes and spend that money to run the government. It's Congress's job to decide how much tax the president gets to collect and what he's allowed to spend it on. So both the president and Congress are responsible for the government budget. Ultimately, Congress needs to pass a series of appropriations bills. These are spending bills based on the agreed-upon budget for the parts of the government that need funding every year. But, and I know this will come as a shock, Congress is not good at this. In fact, in the last 40 years, they've only passed their spending bills on time 4 times. The last time was more than 20 years ago. If it can't pass appropriations bills on time, Congress can pass what are known as continuing resolutions. These are a type of spending bill that will fund existing government programs at a rate similar to the previous year, until they can pass a new bill. Basically, Congress buys itself more time. Sometimes, a lot more time. In 2017, it took Congress 216 days to pass the spending bills for fiscal year 2017, which was already mostly over. It's just like in college when you email your professor for an extension on that midterm paper, except in this case, you can just ask yourself for the extension, which means you end up turning in your paper 5 years after you already graduated. So, hypothetical here. What if Congress were divided between two political parties that hate each other and can't agree on anything? Or if the president and Congress are divided between two political parties that hate each other and can't agree on anything? I know, far-fetched, but bear with me. What if Congress is so dysfunctional they not only can't pass appropriations bills, they can't even pass those extensions? Or what if the president refuses to sign these bills into law? Well, there's an obscure piece of law called the Antideficiency Act, or ADA. It says basically that federal programs and agencies can't go into debt. So if Congress can't pass these spending bills, then there's no money for these things. That triggers a government shutdown. Now obviously, most people wouldn't want the government to shut down. For one, what would we do without the IRS? But let's go back to our purely hypothetical scenario where two parties are constantly trying to undermine each other at every turn. Wouldn't a government shutdown be a great weapon to use against the other party to get what you want? Here's an appropriations bill that includes $10 billion in funding for Harry Potter fan fiction. What? You don't approve? Then we're shutting down the government. Government employees won't be paid, and officials can't buy the things they need to run the government, though some essential things like the military and courts still operate. But, for example, the military won't actually get paid till the budget gets sorted. Government shutdowns have happened for a variety of reasons over the years. Funding for abortion, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, welfare, in recent cases, immigration, and a border wall. In total, there have been 20 government shutdowns since 1976. That's kind of a lot. That's like once every 2.1 years. although most of them were for short periods of time, like 2 or 3 days. The last one that happened in February of this year was only 9 hours long and happened overnight, so it didn't really affect anything. But why do they keep happening? Government shutdowns are a great way to play political games and manipulate voters at the expense of the entire country. That's one reason they often happen when the president and the majority in Congress are from different parties. Although there have been shutdowns when both Congress and the president were from the same party, like when Jimmy Carter was president with the Democratic Congress back in the 1970s, or the 2 shutdowns so far this year with a Republican Congress and president. And now there's talk of a possible 3rd shutdown if appropriations aren't finished by the end of September. Right now the Republicans have the majority in Congress, so it's easy for Democrats to blame them for not passing a budget. And this will hurt Republican candidates in the November midterm elections. But really, it's President Trump who holds the cards this time. He wants Congress to allocate $25 billion to pay for that wall along the Mexican border he's been promising for 2 years. But $25 billion is more than any Democrat and some Republicans want to spend. So now, Trump is threatening to not sign a budget at all unless it includes enough money for the border wall he wants. Back in 2013, the government shut down because of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Republicans who controlled the Senate didn't want to approve a spending bill that included the Affordable Care Act, while the Democrats who controlled the House of Representatives wouldn't pass a bill without it. The 2 parties couldn't reach a compromise by October 1st, so the government shut down for 16 days because it had no money to spend. Non-essential government operations were shut down. Federal workers went home and no one got paid, except for Congress, whose pay is not affected by government shutdowns. And the Obama administration then was like, well, since you Republicans are forcing us to shut the government down, guess we have to shut down things like the Lincoln Memorial. Now, gating up the Lincoln Memorial, as well as the Jefferson Memorial, the Vietnam Memorial, and the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., that wasn't strictly necessary. You can get to them without ever going to a visitor center or going through a manned security gate. But it sure did make people angry at Republicans. In the end, the Obama administration's Office of Management and Budget estimated that the 16-day government shutdown cost the government $2 billion in back pay to federal employees, cost 120,000 private sector jobs, and worst of all, delayed $4 billion in tax refunds. And CNN took it a step further, saying in their usual calm, objective way that the shutdown could literally kill us all.
And in space that same year, for more than 2 weeks, NASA reportedly stopped monitoring potentially dangerous asteroids. A big one, by the way, is expected to brush by Earth on February 4th.
Wow, that would create a deep impact. I hope when it comes to passing this year's spending bills, Congress says, I don't want to miss a thing. What's that, Shelley? Wrong asteroid movie? Well, I guess you wouldn't want me to trigger an America Uncovered shutdown, would you? Wait, no. That would backfire terribly. Which is actually a risk when it comes to government shutdowns. For example, there was a government shutdown in January of this year. That was thanks largely to the fight over DACA and, surprise, the funding of the border wall. The Trump administration squarely put the blame on Democrats, saying they were holding the country hostage. Oh, and they're losers. But unlike the 2013 shutdown under Obama, in January 2018, the Trump administration wanted the shutdown to affect the public as little as possible. They were planning to keep national parks, monuments, and memorials open as much as they could. Which makes sense. When your own party is in power, you want to minimize the damage of a government shutdown. In the end, though, January's government shutdown lasted only 1 business day. So hardly anyone was affected, except by another reminder that this is something programmed into the U.S. government that could happen at any time. Perhaps sooner than you think. Guess we'd better watch out for asteroids. Now, government shutdowns are not something that happens in other countries. It's a uniquely American problem, which makes it the greatest problem on Earth. But seriously, this is unique to the U.S. No other country shuts down its government in the same way the U.S. does. It's a way to ensure no one political party gets too much power. You need 3/5 of Senate members to pass most legislation, which means they frequently rely on bipartisan support. In other parliamentary systems around the world, like Australia, lawmakers usually only need around 50% of parliament on board. But also, parliamentary systems are just structured differently. The prime minister is not the same as a president. He's just the lead member of whichever political party has the most seats in parliament. This is how it works in these countries. The prime minister prepares a government budget and submits it to parliament for a vote. But if parliament rejects that budget, that's generally considered a sign that the government no longer has the confidence of parliament and has to resign. But here's another difference. In the U.S., if Congress doesn't pass spending bills, the money to pay for things simply dries up. In other countries, spending continues according to the previous budget or some other default that keeps the money flowing. In fact, the Belgian government worked for 589 days while they technically didn't have a government. So why does the U.S. not have that mechanism? Well, as The Atlantic puts it, as a matter of substance, constant shutdown, permanent emergency government is so destructive that no other serious country engages in or could tolerate it. The United States can afford it only because we are still so rich with so much margin for waste and error. In other words, USA #1, baby. However, there is one exception. In 1975, the Australian government did shut down because of a budget deadlock. How did that get resolved? A representative of the Queen dismissed the Prime Minister, replaced him, had that guy pass a new budget, and then dismissed every single member of Parliament. After that, Australian Parliament never failed to pass a budget. But you know what? I somehow don't think that will work in the U.S. So, what do you think about the fact the U.S. government can just shut down? Leave your comments below. And hey, just so you know, YouTube has been demonetizing many of our videos, some in as little as 10 minutes after publication. Google isn't doing us any favors, so please help America Uncovered by sharing this video with your friends and family, subscribing if you haven't already, and if you can, support us on the crowdfunding website Patreon. As a way of saying thanks to our patrons, we'll have polls where you can choose what topics we cover in the future. So head over to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. The link is also below. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.